Thank you.
I don't know if you can even read that. Okay. It's just like, it's hard to read. The door's so Thank you.
How you doing, man?
Good.
Thank you.
Situated. All right.
Is everyone good? All right. Jason, are you good? Okay. Observation 1 is the background. The first one is the taxes are endlessly increasing. The first one is an argument here is that under President Obama there have been 6 years of tax increases and we have racked up about $8 trillion in debt. The second one is the brackets are the tax brackets currently are giving to the rich because of the complicated tax code. Argument that the tax code is only able to be taken advantage of by the rich, but also additionally there are multiple tax rates for the wealthiest Americans and stats. For the third argument that the current system is currently hurting low-income individuals. The tax code is rigged with multiple carve-outs and multiple things like tax rates that are able to favor certain types of industries and certain income of individuals. That's the plan. The United States federal government should replace the current income tax on ordinary income with the tax on ordinary income plan as advocated by Republican presidential candidate Jeb Bush. It's a resolution. The United States federal government should replace the current income tax on ordinary income, redundant, with the tax on ordinary income plan as advocated by Republican presidential candidate Jeb Bush. If you need a copy, I'll give it to you in a second. Solvency, the first one, the plan is cuts individual tax rates from 7 brackets down to 3. The tax brackets that the plan would create are 28%, 25%, and 10% tax rates. At 28%, the highest bracket of income earners would be where Reagan had it at in 1986 with his tax reform policies. The eighth point of this is that 15 million individuals would not be taxed at all, or would not have income tax liability under the Jeb Bush plan. This also doubles the standard deduction and now by taking 2/3 of filers, for 2/3 of filers. Visa point is also to eliminate the marriage penalty and expands the earned income tax credit. This would do things such as in the estate or death tax and retire alternative minimum tax and ends employees' share of the Social Security tax on earnings for workers over 67. The second argument is the plan also eliminates tax loopholes that the wealthiest never have to pay. The eighth point of this is that they are still some reductions exist, such as a 2% charity deduction. But most of these type of loopholes and tax deductions are closed. The third one is also even close deductions to the rich because the lower or we would lower or hold the marginal rate of taxes at every income level. The NPR indicates that we would decrease loopholes down because we would only allow for a 2% deduction for things such as charity. This is adjusted to an individual's gross income. The advantage one is the middle class. The eight supports the middle class status quo. The first argument that middle class income is drastically increasing. According to the New York Times, other developed nations and other developed nations have drastically been increasing raises for the middle class. The United States has been falling behind for 3 decades compared to the rest of the globe. The second one is the tax breaks are hurting hurting the middle class and the working class. Our argument is the middle class tax breaks are currently 25 to 33%. This is also difficult for middle class because although tax credits do exist, there's very poor tax credit distribution due to the complicated form of the tax code. The status quo individuals are all of low income are not able, many of them, to even are falling into poverty because they're not even able to pay their income taxes. The third one is that also that Americans think that the middle class is drastically shrinking. According to the MacArthur Foundation, a poll indicated that 79% of Americans think that the middle class is decreasing and will cease to exist within the next few years. The fourth argument is that young individuals and young members of the working class are hurt the most. Individuals from 18 to 28 are hurt the most. That is us, such as the individuals within this room. The National Journal indicates that young individuals are unable to save because they do not get enough tax breaks in the status quo. Many of them are just starting out in the workforce, which means that they need this type of assistance. Now, the little aid of this is that they are being failed because of the earned income tax credit is for individuals that don't have a child or childless individuals. Only a $750 deduction, which is not enough for these individuals to be able to get by in the status quo. We would double that and allow for them to be able to have enough money saved through the tax credit to allow for them to do things such as save and allow for them to keep more of the money that they make at their job. The argument is that the Fortune also indicates that in October that the middle class is set to disappear within the next few years and no longer exists, which means that we would just have an upper class and a lower class. This is bad for a few reasons. I'll get to later. Base link plan cells. First argument, the NPR indicates that we would increase the disposable income of the individuals by quite a lot. In fact, it would increase it by at least $2,000. $2,000 to these individuals, which allow them to be much better off because they would have disposable income and means that they are functionally paying less in taxes because we are simplifying the tax code, but it would still allow for the government to function because it allows for the elimination of deductions for the wealthiest Americans. The second one is that we also have a perception of a growth in the middle class. For example, we would be able to eliminate outsourcing fears according to Bloomberg because we give a tax credit to companies that bring their business or that bring their workers back to the United States. A little later, this is that we would return to jobs in the United States because there is a 5% deduction for individuals that recover their jobs from overseas, which means that outsourcing would dramatically decrease. The third one is that we would save the middle class. The National Journal indicates that this increase in disposable income, in addition to the fact that jobs are coming back to the United States and outsourcing no longer exists, which means that middle class people get access to more jobs, but also they don't have to pay as many taxes, which means that they will be able to survive. Sees that the middle class disappearing is uniquely bad. The first argument of this is that this would mean that individuals are, first of all, individuals in the status quo are losing jobs and are unable to survive because they literally cannot pay for things. This is uniquely bad. First of all, joblessness is bad because it means that you are stuck in poverty. This is bad for a few reasons. A little bit into this is that individuals in poverty are often determined to be disposable populations because we don't care how they are impacted by the economy. The next argument to this is often people in poverty also are homeless and have to make decisions about whether or not to feed their family or have a roof over their head. This often leads to starvation, which is bad in and of itself because people die. But also, if there's no middle class, it means there's only an upper class and a lower class, which means that people are never able to have mobility in the economy. This is bad as well because it means that individuals will be stuck in systemic poverty. Advantage 2 is manufacturing. These points that the United States is falling behind manufacturing sets. So the first argument is that China is displacing the United States and is dramatically increasing in us compared to the global stage in manufacturing according to the United Nations. Second argument is the U.S. manufacturing is dramatically decreasing. Our argument here is the goods fell in October according to Reuters, and outsourcing is the reason why. So because we are not investing in the U.S. manufacturing industry here, but instead going overseas. The third one is the U.S. futures. The future projections for U.S. manufacturing are also weak according to U.S. News. The United States is seeing the third month of decline in manufacturing, and this is set to decrease more in the future. Fourth argument is China is dramatically growing in their manufacturing because we are outsourcing jobs to them according to Reuters, which is why we have to bring jobs back to the United States. These link plans also personally we make the United States look a little more attractive because it is 5% cheaper. We've talked about above how we give them a tax credit if they bring jobs back to the United States. The second one is also our tax code is better. The eighth one is this that we simplify the tax code and we functionally it's in the status quo of tariffs and preventing businesses from coming to the United States because our tax code is too high. We cut it to 20%, which would allow for individuals to come back to the United States. It is seen as much better than 35%. 20% is less than China, which means that we are seen as more attractive than the visa points. That also we provide incentives for them to come back. But as we talked about above with our tax credit, the third is that this means that we increase employment and bring investment back in the United States manufacturing industry because there are more jobs, means that productivity would increase here as well. So you see in terms like that this is key to hegemony. The first one is this manufacturing is key to hegemony for a few reasons. The eighth one is key to trade alliances. We have to have manufacturing industry to forge trade alliances with the country, which is key to having access to things such as basing rights and having alliances such as collective security agreements. Based on that China is also ignoring U.S. patent law according to U.S. News because of the fact that they are able to have all of our jobs there for our manufacturing industry, which means they're out competing with us. The second one is the U.S. hegemony is key to fallback for proliferation for allies because they are afraid that China is advancing ahead of us, which means that they are fearing that a backlash would occur, which means that they would defend themselves inevitably in the status quo.
Go ahead.
Asking questions.
Ask questions. Yeah. Alright, starting process time. So your plan is to basically eliminate the tax brackets, right?
Not to eliminate, it's now there are 7 tax brackets, we bring it down to 3, which simplifies the tax code.
Okay, so
And we eliminate deductions.
Okay, so having 3 tax brackets, how does that help middle class economics?
Because right now they use the tax code to be able to do it. Like Bloomberg and all these other news institutions are indicating that these rich individuals are taking advantage of the tax brackets. Like tax brackets are not the only thing the plan does. It eliminates loopholes that are allowing the rich to exploit them now.
Okay, but doesn't this like also conflate like capital gains with ordinary income? Like his plan literally eliminates the distinction between capital gains and ordinary income.
No, he defines ordinary income as wages, interest earned, and commission, not anything to do with
But
capital
he
gains.
literally
Capital
said
gains is
that
the
he's
difference between the
like
pull-up
eliminating
stock.
the difference between capital gains and ordinary
I mean,
income.
I'm sure he says a lot of things, but his plan does not affect that. It is the definition that we are bringing you.
So what he says about his plan doesn't affect what his
Well,
plan
his actual plan and his
Like-
rhetoric around the plan are not the same thing. A lot of politicians do things like posturing and bolstering up what they're saying. I mean, he says a lot of things. We saw Rick Perry say
Why
oops, it doesn't
does
mean it's
manufacturing
policy.
decline cause China to go to war with the United States?
It
It's not China. It's our allies are worried that China is advancing too far ahead of the United States, so they feel like we can't maintain our security alliances.
Wouldn't they already
So
feel
they
that
would-
now?
Yeah, they're on the brink.
Yes, they're on the brink. These are our arguments as to why it's critical to restore our manufacturing
Okay,
industry.
so
because
cool,
China's
so
being
how
ahead
long
of
would
us.
your tax plan take to restore that confidence in the manufacturing sector?
Pretty much immediately, because we provide a 5% tax deduction immediately, which means
How
that
does-
businesses would
How
come
do you
back to the
affect the
United States.
manufacturing sector by replacing an ordinary income tax?
Because we are, this plan doesn't just, it does that, but it also allows for, it simplifies the tax code, which means that it provides a 5% tax credit to
You just replace the ordinary
businesses to come
income
back.
tax. How do you change the tax?
That is not
code?
what the plan just does. You do not listen to solvency. We say that you provide a 5% tax credit to businesses to no longer outsource jobs and bring them back to the
But
United
how
States.
is that
That's part of his
helpful if the plan just?
that is part
Jeb
of
Bush's
Jeb Bush's
primary
plan.
Okay, so it's gonna be 2 up and then a new sheet of paper on top of case, because it's a solvency dump. Okay?
Are any of these criticisms?
No.
No. And then it's gonna be the advantages in order, so yeah, 2 on case straight down. And if I ever get too fast for you, Jason, just let me know and I'll slow up for sure. Okay, so we ready? Alright, are you all ready?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
The ace pointed that Marco Rubio was ultimately voted with the primary as well as the general. The first argument is he's winning the endorsements. He's getting quicker endorsements than anybody. He's got 7 at the last month, which represents the electoral college's choice. The little one under this is that a study done by 4 political scientists in the New York Times in the 1980s says that this was the best metric to determine who would ultimately get elected. The 2 under this is this provide evidence for Rubio to who is the establishment choice. This wraps up the primaries quickly and means that he will ultimately get fostered in. The second argument is that he'll ultimately win the general poll in New Hampshire, and I will put Rubio ahead by a significant margin because of the appeal to small businesses as well as the rural communities. But he's also getting voters that no one else is going to get. The first argument is that Bernie's absolutely too left for him to win the general election. That was demonstrated by the polling in which he's far behind Hillary Clinton. But additionally, the second argument is that Hillary Clinton's foreign policy is far too hawkish for the liberals to be able to support, but her economic policies are far too liberal for the moderates to support, an indication that she's not going to win. The third argument is that this could spin rapidly, and Bush could become the choice. The little one under this is that Bush is in perfect position in order to be able to come back. 538 said this. He just needs something in order to be able to jumpstart his fiscal campaign. The second argument of this is that Bush has the overall lead in the endorsements, but it made his help Rubio shine through and get several in the last several months. But additionally, the next argument is that you would swing the primary for Bush. The later one under this is that the Bush tax cuts reverses the establishment choice, swinging voters and endorsements. Obviously, they would think that Bush is the primary candidate if his tax plan was endorsed. But additionally, the second argument is this makes Rubio look like a number 2 candidate because Bush is at the front of the media and because Rubio's policy has been put on the back burner. The third argument is that he'll lose and. The third argument is that Rubio is not enough ahead in order to be able to send such a large enough hit, an indication that Bush is going to come back and win the general. The next argument is going to be the internal links. This is ultimately going to lead to proliferation. The first argument is that Bush distinguished himself from Rubio in May and said that he would repeal the Iran deal, whereas Rubio wants to strengthen it. The second argument is that Rubio wants to increase the oversight by allowing congressional input and pushing for inspections and allowing better mechanisms for oversight in the future. The third argument is that a Bush repeal would ultimately lead to Iranian rapid proliferation because they like the deal in the status quo. This would force the Ayatollah's hand. The fourth argument is this leads to a preemptive Israeli strike because they feel that they've been bolstered by Jeb Bush getting into office, but as well as the fact that they have just repealed the Iranian deal. The D's point is that this draws in all national superpowers because China and Russia support Iran, and the United States obviously supports Israel. This leads to massive multilateral nuclear strikes, but additionally the next is going to be the DISAD. The ace point is that Puerto Rico economy is stable now. The first argument that growth is solid in Puerto Rico with GNP currently at 1.3% over the last 2 years, but that decline is buoyed by the biotech and pharmaceutical development. The second argument is that Puerto Rico relies on the U.S. tax breaks for specific companies based on foreign income. The third argument is that in the status quo, debt reconstruction talks are taking place, but that is dependent on growth in order to be able to solve the debt in the future. The B point is that the plan would ultimately wreck this. The first argument is that the AFS tax decrease would require an increase, would require what? Would require increases in taxes in order to be able to sustain the program's development. The second argument is that Obama would push for what? Obama would push for what?
Foreign profit taxes.
He would push for foreign profit taxes. He's proposed it in conjunction with the House, and he wants it. And he wants to halt outsourcing. The third argument is that that tax hits the United States-based companies in Puerto Rico that produce jobs by U.S. citizens. The C argument is this collapse the Puerto Rico economy. The first argument is that biotech and pharma companies would leave Puerto Rico because they're 40% of the GDP. The second argument is that this would collapse the Puerto Rican economy. Obviously, 40% that would ultimately lead to environmental collapse because the race to expand the energy
they have to race to expand energy resources.
They have to race to expand energy resources, and that ultimately destroys the offshore reefs because Puerto Rico has a wide access of oil access within the Gulf. But additionally, the next argument is the collapse of the ocean and biodiversity is ultimately bad because we see that all of these biospheres are connected, and that another Gulf water horizon event in the Gulf of Mexico would potentially be devastating, considering that biodiversity is extremely tenuous after the oil spill a couple of years ago. But additionally, the next argument, this would ultimately culminate in extinction because we see that the biospheres are connected. Earth life is needed to sustain Earth life, and we can't have oxygen being produced from the oceans, and we would ultimately die. But additionally, this would ultimately turn case because what is this?
That's fine.
Oh, it turns the manufacturing industry because biotechnology companies in the United States would seek to leave because they would see Puerto Rico's collapse, and they would want to get out while they still be able to. This is on the case block. The first argument would be that taxes are key to a lot of shit that will become apparent. The ACE point is that hegemony is currently tenuous because in the age of the sequester, we're having to do more with less revenue. This is the basing arguments that Caitlin's making at the bottom of the hegemony advantage. But additionally, the B point is that with less revenue overall, with the tax plan brings in less revenue overall, which means that we have to cut a certain program. The Ohio replacement program is uniquely on the cutting block in Congress right now. That means that absolutely gets cut. The C point is that the Ohio replacement program is necessarily in order to be able to power project in the future because we have less basing, which means that we have to have our nuclear umbrella strength. And the Ohio replacement program is replacing the nuclear submarines that we built in the 1970s. These nuclear submarines are going to be the crux of our nuclear arsenal. They're going to carry 16 trident nuclear weapons, and they're going to embolden our allies. Absent these, hegemony will collapse because we will not have the ability to power project because we are losing basing rights. That leads to extinction. You can cross-apply that impact from the bottom of the PMC. But additionally, the next argument is that the ACE point is that the government is currently funding green tech ventures. The Solyndra example from 2008 proved, even though that was just one company out of hundreds that ultimately failed. The BC point is that less governmental revenue as a result of Bush's tax plan means that we cannot have private-public partnerships in order to be able to solve back for this. The CISA point is that innovation that is a result of private-public partnerships, i.e. the tech sharing from the U.S. federal government to the private sector, is ultimately critical to be able to solve for things like warming because carbon capture, sequestration, as well as biochar and stuff like that. The D support is that warming is the most probable scenario for extinction, and that will ultimately kill everybody. But additionally, the next argument is that the A point is that the U.S. is the #1 exporter of food and food aid. The B point is that the less revenue means that social and aid programs get historically cut, especially with GOP supermajorities within the Congress. And the C point is that food is ultimately critical because 2 billion people live on $1 a day, and that any live on $1 a day and spend 75% of their income, which means that any cuts would have uniquely affect these people. But additionally, the next argument, you can go to the case specifically.
Are you on case solvency?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm not going to go to the case solvency. I mean, that advantage specifically, you can go to advantage 1 middle class. The ace point is that you actually crush the middle class because you're not knowledgeable about Bush's tax cuts. 538 did an article a couple of days ago which indicated that 50% of the tax cuts go to the top 1%. An indication that you are crushing the middle class. The reason why the middle class gets crushed is not because, this is the state of the economics. It's because the tax cuts go to the 1%ers, and then they in turn are able to crush the middle class because they can reinvest in areas that the middle class can't. They just fill all of the investment opportunities so that the middle class can not do that. Once they saturate the market, then the middle class has no opportunity for the savings that you talk about. So that in turn turns the advantage. But at least the next argument is you say you eliminate outsourcing. No, you don't, because you actually lowered the corporate tax rate by about 30% under Bush. This means that they have more capital in order to be able to transfer abroad. That is absolutely devastating because whenever they have more money, these companies have demonstrated that their profit is the only goal and indication that they will move overseas. But additionally, economic collapse is ultimately inevitable. We saw 3 weeks ago that China's economy devalued at 9.5%, which was almost literally a tenth of their economy evaporating like that. The next argument is that Russia's economy is currently tenuous in the status quo. 50% of its GDP over the last year has been demolished because of the decreases in oil prices. But additionally, the next argument is we see that these are ultimately inevitable because of resource crises that will rack the earth by 2030 because we are running out of critical resources like oil, natural gas, and water and stuff like that, which means that the price will rapidly increase and the price of input goods and stuff like that will massively increase. Means we can't produce goods. That ultimately leads to economic collapse. You can go to the second second advantage now. The first argument is that you're never going to be able to overwhelm China. China's far too attractive in the status quo. Their stock of human capital is far better. I'll make the analogy that China has more 1%, China has more top 10% students than the United States has students, an indication that their R&D and innovation sectors will be rapidly innovating in the future, an indication that they will always supplant the United States as the place where foreign direct investment will go. But additionally, the next argument is you said that you lead to an investment, but you can cross-apply the arguments as to why you would necessarily lead to a decrease in the corporate tax rate, which would allow them to go overseas. This is a straight turn to the advantage. But additionally, the next argument is you would cause jobs to additionally, I don't want those. What?
Just like they can't hedge inevitable.
Yeah, hedge is ultimately inevitable in the status quo, absent your plan, because we have the Ohio replacement program, an indication that our nuclear umbrella will be able to check our allies, which means that this is ultimately irrelevant, but you would actually collapse that. You would collapse our ability to have hegemony because we wouldn't have the nuclear replacement program.
Okay.
Alright, I'm starting to realize.
All right, starting cross-ex. Okay, so you're reading election politics, but what, like, how is it not just too early to predict? Like, Obama was not predicted to win in 2008
Well,
this early.
Yes, he was. This was, okay, look.
No.
First, that is factually incorrect because 12 months before the election, Obama was picked to win. Obama was clearly picked to win
The other thing is that our uniqueness is based on a longitudinal study that indicates that if you have the most donation selections by the Electoral College, you're considered the establishment foundation. That was done from 1980 until 2010.
So,
and indicates that that's the best
cool.
indicator.
So what about the non-establishment candidates that are rapidly increasing in the polls, like Ben Carson and Donald Trump?
Well, like I said, they don't have the donation, they don't have the establishment
have
choice.
donations?
They have donations, but they're not even comparable to the way that Rubio is rising at the same rate. But also, being the establishment choice is how you get the Electoral College.
Okay, that's cool. And then you have your Puerto Rico economy advantage. Can you just explain the link a little bit for me?
Yeah, the argument is that as a result of your tax cuts, that means that there are pushes for foreign tax increases on foreign profits. That's also a result of Bush's plan. Well, first of all, because you massively decrease revenue, but also because that's a result of what Bush wants.
That's the plan. Sorry.
Okay, and then you have arguments as to why the Puerto Rican economy collapse leads to environmental collapse. Can you explain the internal link to that?
Yeah, there's two reasons for that. The first is that economic decline requires them to offshore rapidly in order to get access to energy
To
resources.
offshore drill?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was just making sure that's what that was. All right, and then on you read a lot on solvency. You say these are just trade-off terms, right? Like you say that we won't have enough money to fund the government post-plan.
Basically, you massively decrease the revenue that the government has to spend on extra programs. Supermajorities for Republicans in Congress means that the programs that are being put right now that are actually important get cut.
Okay, and then we got that on solvency. Then you say that the middle class. Why you say that the tax cuts go to the top?
Yes, 50% of Bush's tax cuts in his plan, true story, go to the top 1% of earners. That's a factual statement.
Alrighty, the order is going to be the Rubio dissad about elections. It's going to be the Puerto Rico dissad, and then it's going to be the case. Sorry.
What's the order?
It's politics. It's the same order as the LOC.
Yes.
Everyone good? The problem in this debate is that they have no uniqueness claim to any of their economic arguments, nor any of their turns. They're not going to be able to win this debate because they conceded that the decline is inevitable now, which means it is trying to write for the middle class. But starting on the dissent, the first argument is that there's no way to tell. This is too soon to be able to tell any of this. Oh yeah, just drop to the impacts. Actually, scratch all that. First argument is that the Iran deal is bad. The first argument is that Mossad and BP have indicated that they were watching the Republican House and the status quo to be able to repeal the deal. That is the only reason that they're not acting. This means that they're ready to act because of the fact that they feel that the deal is going to be repealed in the status quo. If they show that the deal is not, if they feel like the deal is not going to be repealed, that's when they strike because they feel like the deal is a bad thing, which means that it's critical to be repealed, which means that repealing is ultimately a good thing. The next argument is Saudi Arabia is also watching to be able to stop the deal in the status quo because Saudi Arabia has no nuclear weapons on back order. They're saying they will only use if the deal is allowed to go through. The only thing that's stopping them in the status quo is because they feel that Republicans' efforts are going to be able to do this. Next argument is that the Iran deal is bad because it gives Iran a year alone, which ultimately means that they can develop nuclear weapons. This is exactly why Saudi Arabia and BP are both watching this in the status quo. The next argument is that also it gives the Iran a year alone, which allows them to trade oil. This means that they would be able to jump into the market. Saudi Arabia is indicating that if Iran is allowed to trade oil with this year that they have under the deal, then they will ultimately flood the market to be able to flood Iran out because they don't want the competition, which means that this leads to economic decline in the past. Historical indicators have indicated when the market has been flooded with oil in the past, it ultimately leads to economic decline. Specifically, when you read that economic decline is inevitable in the status quo because of China and Russia, that puts us is on the brink, which means that economic decline is also inevitable. The next argument is that they would never, your scenario is never going to happen. They're not going to strike if the deal is repealed because BAB does not like the deal, which is exactly why why he would never do this. Your scenario just doesn't make any sense with the interest of Israel and the status quo, which means that it would never work. The next argument is also Saudi Arabia is watching it, which means that there's no ability. The next argument is also this would ultimately lead to a nuclear clock by the Carnegie Institute indicates that this would change the balance of power within the Middle East if the Iran deal is actually allowed to go through, which is trying to be blocked by Republicans. And the status quo reason why it's not changing. This means that we're ultimately absolutely critical to causing a change. If the balance of power ultimately changes, this means that nuclear war is inevitable because it becomes a quagmire. Iran ultimately has troops in Yemen and a bunch of other countries like that, which is exactly why Saudi Arabia is ultimately upset in the status quo. But also, this leads to instability within Yemen because it gives Iran too much power in the region. This also leads to non-state violence and an unstable government within Yemen, which leads to displaced populations, which means that they are able to do the next argument of the year. Well, and it's also a problem because it doesn't allow for inspections, which means the international community is very skeptical of this happening. Next argument is also.
That's fine.
Okay. The next is then. First of all, I want you to gut check this argument. There are multiple arguments in here, like that Obama is going to pass a new tax for their links, which is a future link, which doesn't even matter. That they are working on debt deals in the status quo, and they don't even say which way they're going to break down. Like, you need to hold this as skeptical, and if they expand on it in the next speech, then I think we get pretty good answers in the PMR on the uniqueness. First argument is that United States manufacturing is ultimately critical to propping up Puerto Rico and the status quo. Puerto Rico uses a lot of the products that the United States also uses our R&D to be able, also uses R&D from the United States mainland to be able to promote their biotech sectors and the status quo. Also, the big pharma is actually on the mainland United States that goes outsourced to Puerto Rico, which means that our manufacturing is down on the mainland. That we are seeing a decline in Puerto Rico as well. Next time you say that the exact are happening in the status quo, this will actually never work because the two sides are not going to agree with each other, which means that there's no way that you're going to have any uniqueness. So this is any uniqueness means that you will never win this debate. The next argument is you say that we increase taxes on this is going to be able to help 100% of the manufacturing sector because it brings back jobs to America, which means that there's a 5% credit for them to be able to do this. Also, China is where we outsource a lot of our big pharma, which means that if we bring it back to the United States, including Puerto Rico, we would allow for them to be their next argument is no link. You say the foreign profit tax push by Obama. We don't lead to a foreign profit tax push by Obama. Also, no warrant to that argument whatsoever. No reason as why you can pass it through Republican Congress, and the status quo means that you don't have to link to this argument. Next argument, you say this collapses the Puerto Rico economy. Why the Puerto Rico economy is not the only thing that's inevitably key to this. Also, we would indicate that there are multiple measures in the status quo, like building artificial reefs that are ultimately going to allow for this. Puerto Rico is not the one that's building the artificial reefs. As scientists in public partnerships it's the private industry on the mainland of the United States that are actually doing this, which means they have artificial reefs, which check back for 100% of this. Also, we would say that there's ultimately clean up things that could happen in the status quo. Oil is not going to be able to do this. So specifically in the Busan oil spill, we used hair mats to be able to clean up oil. This was an organic way to be able to clean up oil. Also, anaerobic digesters were used in the Gulf to be able to do this, which means that doesn't harm the environment away to ultimately do this. Also, environmental collapse has no time frame, which means you're never going to vote for it in this debate. Also, there is no reason why this ultimately lead to extinction. They don't have any reason by biotech. Also, we would say the biotech is ultimately never going to be able to reform the environment whatsoever because what?
Go, I'm just gonna.
Okay, well, it's never going to be able to resolve the 100% of the environment because these tactics have never worked in the past. Means that they're not going to be able to do it in the future.
Ryan, question.
I'll get to you at the end of the case. So I'll let you know.
Okay, so on this one.
Well, it's okay. We'll get it later.
On the taxes argument, the tax is key. First argument, I would ask you to gut check all these arguments. There's not a single percentage nor a single number that is actually giving you. This is all just tenuous in the status quo. They're basically saying if we would drop tax revenue like $1 or something, there's no brink that's given. There's no argument as to where the link is at all. He's just like, oh, cutting taxes would be bad. No. First of all, the economic output would be able to increase with the plan, which means that we'd actually give we would have a better economy after the plan, which means that this is ultimately going to be better. Also, we are conceding arguments to say that individuals are not able to pay their taxes in the status quo. They are defaulting on their taxes as per the middle class because they are going into poverty because they can't pay their taxes, which means that all this would be inevitable in the status quo. Next argument is that we would never cut defense spending. No reason why we would actually cut this. Also, our allies are already suspect, which means that you have your only uniqueness argument is that we have to do more with less in the status quo. That is not a uniqueness argument on hedge. Our uniqueness argument is that our allies are on the brink now because they're worried about our manufacturing sector. You don't have uniqueness to this turn, which means that we would always beat you on this argument on green tech. You say the green tech is ultimately going to go down because of our interest in the status quo. You say the public-private partnerships are doing this. We would say the private industry would sustain this without the government. No reason as why the government is key. Even if we have less tax argument, also you're conceding our insolvency arguments that indicate that we would allow for more taxes to come in because we decrease the burden on the middle class, which means that they can actually pay their taxes, which they're not paying in the status quo, which means that we would resolve that. Also, no time for more worry. Also, you're going to cross by 100% of our arguments. This is why the warming scenario would never happen. Also, you say U.S. food aid would only go down because there's a supermajority in Congress. One is that starvation is inevitable in the status quo. You can see that people won't be able to pay for this. Also, or we would say that U.S. food aid is bad at crowds out industries like in Africa where we put a bunch of food in, but then the local vendors of food were actually put in more poverty, which means that our U.S. food aid is actually a bad thing, which means that it is inevitably worse. Okay, what's your question?
Yeah, so you said that we export most of our pharma is outsourced to China. How?
These are our arguments about manufacturing is outsourced to China. We would bring the jobs back. Go on.
I know, but specifically about pharma.
Advantage 1. You said that it would crush the middle class because it ultimately leads to 50% going to the top. This is the squo. There is inevitably this divide that's happening in the squo. Bloomberg News indicated that Jeb Bush's plan is ultimately critical because it increases the purchasing power of the middle class, which means that we would be able to do this. Your reinvestment argument doesn't make any sense because we give the power to the middle class to be able to do this. Even if the rich are investing, still the middle class is now able to invest, which means we resolve that problem. You say the lower corporate tax rate would ultimately mean that they transfer abroad. No, that's not how it works. The reason they're going abroad is because we have a higher rate than China. We flip that. That literally does not make economic sense. You say economic collapse is inevitable. You give no reason why the United States economic collapse is inevitable. Reasons why China and Russia are on the brink are the reasons why the US dollar needs to remain intact or we will face a global economic shutdown. Thank you for giving us more of a break. The next argument, you say that resource decline is ultimately happening in the status quo. We get more purchase power. Also, this inevitably is not true. The government would, this inevitably is not true. The price, these are inelastic goods. These are resources that we actually need, which means price increases do not affect demand, which means that there's no ability for this to actually happen. You have no reason as to why they would actually even go up to a certain price. The lack of statistics is going to be the reason why they lose this debate. Advantage 2. First of all, you say that China is too attractive in the status quo. That is our uniqueness. That is why we're saying we need to flip the amount of taxes that we ultimately give. We give it 5% cheaper. Also, we cut it to 20%, which is better than China, which means that you just gave us more uniqueness. You said cross-supply. I've already answered those arguments. You say the hedge is inevitable because China, Ohio program is going to be able to check without technology in the manufacturing sector. We're not even going to have things like the Ohio program. Looking in the future, we won't have innovation, which means that our allies will inevitably worry. Just one project does not mean that they change us. Also, they look at manufacturing and economy more because they better indicators for how this is going to happen. Just one project does not mean it solves or resolves 100% of hedge.
The order will be the Puerto Rico dissent on top. And then it'll be the Rubio dissent. And then it'll be case.
When you say case, do you mean those three solvencies?
Oh yeah, so it'll be a case in the order of the LOC. It'll be the solvency, the solvency terms, and then it'll be the middle class advantage, and then it'll be protection. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Senate question for third, they will push for the Republic within the Republican Congress. That means at the end, it really never happens. No offense to this dissent. Now go to the politics dissent. You're going to give us a lot of weight on this. They conceded literally every argument that was in the 1NC shell. You just read impact terms, but none of your impact terms are articulate as the internal link scenario. You conceded the second internal link argument that says when Rubio gets into office, he will fix all the problems with the Iran deal by pushing more inspections and tighter regulations. That solves literally all of the concerns of peoples in the Middle East, which means that if there's any risk of a deal bad offense that they want to be able to solve, that means the status quo is necessarily critical because Rubio winning will literally link towards all of your offense. But lastly, you can see that Bush win ultimately results in pro-live because of real the Iranian pro-live deal means that Iran feels like they are not going to be able to get access to their sanctions. They want the bill in the status quo because it allows them to be able to get access to the economic revenue that is necessary to allow them to grow. But whenever they repeal, Iran will ramp up its nuclear centrifuges as a result, and that will ultimately lead to Israel first strike because they don't want to actually get the ball. Whereas the tightening of inspections via Rubio is critical to solve for the solidarity. You've conceded that Rubio will win in the status quo. That it is an indication by the MIT study. The MIT study was done from 1980 to 2010 as an indication that the best way in which to judge whether or not Rubio will win is whether or not he is the establishment choice. They have not contested this. They have also not contested the link arguments to indicate that Bush will win as a result of tax cuts. Because of that means that he looks like the establishment choice as opposed to Rubio, makes Rubio a secondary question, but also means that there's no way in order for him to get access to the same kind of funding. That means that Bush necessarily gets the momentum necessarily to switch. You can see the 538 report, which indicates that all he needs is one big spark and he wins the election.
Yeah,
and I've already sent the internal link down. They've conceded that if proliferation were to happen in the Middle East, that would ultimately result in nuclear conflict. That happens way faster than the affirmative happens like that.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be Iranian pro-life, just the perception that...
Yeah, just the perception that Iran is going to pro-left leads to Israeli first strike because they feel like the United States is emboldening them to do so by abandoning their deal with Iran. Now, their impact terms. The first argument they make is valid, but it's valid. The first argument is this is literally not true. Sanctions are more important to Iran because they want to be able to get access to their economic arguments. There are no warrants in the MG to any of these impact terms. They are literally just blipping out arguments that are not articulated. The next argument is also Rubio is able to solve back for this because he is able to fix the problems with the deal. They have conceded our internal link arguments that indicate that the status quo problems will all be resolved by Rubio election, which means that you don't get access to any of your op-eds. Next, you say Saudi Arabia has orders on back order, but the first argument is they wouldn't buy them because Saudi Arabia likes it when Rubio increases the ability for them to be able to get access to inspections, which means that Saudi Arabia would be comforted by a Rubio win. But the second argument is also that Saudi Arabia proliferation does not lead to Israel first strike the same way that Iranian perception of Iranian Iran and Israel have the unique opposition, whereas Saudi Arabia is simply concerned about Israel's expansion, which means that the plan would be able to solve by solidifying Israeli relations with the deal. The next argument is you say that this leads to Saudi Arabia flood. The first argument is that Russia would be able to solve because Russia would be able to buy and sell oil to Iran, which means that if Iran wants to get their oil access to the market, that Saudi Arabia wouldn't be able to flood. The second argument is Saudi flood doesn't cause anything. The United States has opened drilling, and they are now the #1 oil and gas producer in the world, was an indication that Saudi's impact on the market share has been massively decreased. The next argument is that they will not flood the market. They have purposely tried to keep gas prices low in order to allow for economic growth in other areas of their economy because they're trying to diversify. The status quo is an indication that your argument is simply not true. The next argument is that economic decline is inevitable in the status quo. I'll get that on case, but also proliferation in the Middle East would necessarily turn economic decline because if war happens, there's no ability for having any kind of foreign direct investment in the country or the entire region as a whole, which means that there's massive amount of outsourcing. The next argument is you say it won't happen, but the first argument is yes, there will be repeal. Bush has been pushing. That's how his only delineation between himself and Rubio at this point is the ability to be able to his economic plans, but and his thing about global warming. But also there's an indication that he would be able to draw that distinction by repealing the deal. That's the only thing that gets him ahead. Rubio, the next argument is you say that there would be you say that the Iran deal and the status quo is being blacked out. But the first argument in response to this is that the plan is that the status quo is the only way to be able to actually solidify the Iran deal that make it actually better. Repeal would be bad because it would ultimately lead to the perception that Iran would proliferate because they would start rebuilding their centrifuges because they have no reason not to. It means that their nuclear energy would be key because they wouldn't get access to the sanctions that they actually want. You say that they have troops in Yemen, but this doesn't matter. Like, none of these arguments are relevant to the fact that if Bush wins the election, that proliferation will happen as a result of the repeal, and you've already made the argument for us that there's supermajority of Republicans in Congress means that this would pass immediately. The next argument is you say that there would result of non-state actors. There's literally no warrant to this argument, Jason. There's not a single warrant that is explicated within the MG. You give the PMR no weight on this argument, but additionally, proliferation would also lead to massive instability that allows for the expansion of non-state actors anyway, which means that this would be inevitable in the world of the plan. And the next argument is also that hegemony also would, that's not the argument I want. Alright. Yeah, proliferation as a result of the repeal of the deal would kill United States credibility in the international community. That turns 100% their manufacturing advantage because even if you have solidified hegemony, the international community doesn't believe you're actually going to be able to stick to any of your commitments. That makes allies even more afraid because if you implement the Iran deal and it doesn't get strengthened to be able to prevent prolif and you fail about preventing Iranian proliferation and Israel first strikes because they feel alone, that emboldens allies even more. Now to the case debate. Which ones did you want? Food? Just food. This food? Yeah. On food, Trent? You say starvation is happening in the status quo. Well, the first argument is the response. You concede argument. This argument indicates that the individuals who live on less than $1 a day space 60% of their income on food, but that's sufficient for them to be able to not starve in the status quo. You have, but also your starvation argument is like literally uniqueness about the middle class inside the United States. We're talking about food aid that gets sent to developing countries that require access to food for the United States. The next argument is you say, turn that this leads to the crash of local developments. The first argument is that local development is not possible because the IMF implements structural adjustment programs that prevents small local things from happening anyways, which means that those local developments are only for export, they're not for domestic production. But the second argument is that it doesn't kill local subsistence production, that they grow the farms themselves, but these are not capable to be able to happen because those individuals don't have the access to the money to produce, to buy the seeds because they don't have any kind of money. You said across the argument that India's GOP supermajority would result in a food cut that ultimately leads to a massive amount of starvation that turns and outweighs your middle class advantage as far the way to poverty, and it ultimately leads to insecurity in the region because lack of food resources means that those individuals were more likely to have an unstable economy and unstable growth. Now the middle class advantage. On the econ collapse inevitable, You say no reason the United States econ is down, but the first argument is that all of your internal linked arguments on manufacturing are indications of how the United States and China are interrelated. If China is having massive declines in the status quo, that means the global economy is going down. But the next argument is also, you can see that 50% GDP decline as a result of decline in oil prices in Russia is an indication that the economy is also declining. But this is also important for your manufacturing sector argument. If their economies are so low, that means that the United States doesn't need manufacturing increases because the status quo solves United States increases. That resolves 100% of all of your offense, which means that the economic decline is inevitable, but in the global community, but boosting our manufacturing industry is insufficient to be able to solve back for the status quo decreases in economics, huh?
The crush the middle class, the 50%.
Oh yeah, on the top turn as well about the 50% going to the tax cuts. You say that's the status quo. No, 50% of the tax cuts are not going to them in the status quo. Otherwise, that means that the status quo would solve your app. The affirmative is the one that invests this, that allows for reinvestment by the top 1% that oversaturates the market and makes it impossible for middle class to get access to investments because it leads to inflation and that turns the entirety of the access to your manufacturing.
Outsourcing.
Oh yeah. Wait, what?
The corporate tax rate, the outsourcing.
Oh yeah, the corporate tax rate also results in outsourcing because individuals were allowed to invest more foreign and abroad. You can see the argument there would be no foreign tax profits abroad as a result of the plan. That means that they would simply invest money elsewhere so that they don't get taxed.
Alright, it's going to be the aff, then the dis-aff, with the case stump on top. So just the food turn, middle class, manufacturing, and then the dis-aff. Okay? Is everybody ready?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's going to be the solvency, like the stump stuff,
Yeah.
the food, then middle class, then the manufacturing, then the dis-aff. You go.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, is everybody ready?
Yeah, we're good.
Jason, this is an easy ballot for UT Tyler CH at the point in which they've conceded literally everything but the impacts on the politics dis-aff, which means that we will control the uniqueness, we will control the link, and we will control the internal link. If there is the propensity that we get access to 1% of the risk of our impacts, then we have won this debate because we have won ink on their advantages for sure, but they have yet to win any ink on the dis-aff, and that will become apparent in the LOR when I do impact calculus. But you can go to the case debate now. The food turn is devastating. Ryan's only answer is that, oh yeah, there's starvation now. Yeah, you're talking about starvation in America. We're talking about 2 billion people that live abroad, that survive on 75%, they spend 75% of their income, and they only have $2 a day to live on this. You massively reduce the amount of revenue that the federal government would have, and your only answer to this is, oh, statistics and stuff. We're telling you that you literally reduce the taxable income by a substantial margin. We can't tell you the exact statistics because we're not fucking economists, but we know that it's not the same amount as we had. That allows for Republicans who control both the Senate and the House to cut food aid, which they have historically done, and cut social programs, which they have historically done, which means that people abroad that critically need this money are not going to do so. This turns manufacturing and this turns middle class because of the economies of other countries are waning because, they're not getting access to the food that they need because everyone's dying. Then it's likely that because of interconnectedness, our economy also goes down, but also no one's going to want to come trade with us if, likely everyone's dead. Middle class economics, you're just wrong on this fact. His tax plan necessitates that 50% of the tax cuts go to the top 1% of earners. I read this prior to this debate on 538. Then that is true. You do not solve wealth inequality. The problem with that means that you can never solve for the middle class because when the upper class, the 1%ers, the top 1/10 of 1% gets all the wealth, they fill all of the investment opportunities. They are the ones that are generating all the wealth. Global wealth from 2013 to 2015 went from 123 trillion to 223 trillion. Where did that money go? It didn't go to the fucking middle class. It went to the fucking top 1/10 of 1%. An indication that, yeah, even if you do this, there's absolutely nothing that's going to happen. And the corporate tax rate arguments, we're winning the fact that you would ultimately lead to more outsourcing. They're just weak on this question. You can extend across that you would lead to more outsourcing that straight turns the middle class advantage, and that straight turns manufacturing because absent the ability for you to solve for your jobs, how are you going to supply for the middle class means that straight turns your starvation arguments, but also hegemony collapse is ultimately inevitable. Hegemony collapse is ultimately inevitable in a world where we no longer have people to work in the factories and stuff like that. Yes, and
Econ way down in China and Russia means that there's no uniqueness for their manufacturing.
Like the econ's way down in China and Russia, which they have conceded and said, oh, this just isn't indicative of the United States. It indicates that manufacturing isn't the internal link into the economy, which means that you don't need that to solve. So that's the debate right there.
Point of order. This argument that manufacturing is not the internal link to the economy is new. There's not an analysis of that. You just say their economies are down, which means that we don't have uniqueness.
That's absolutely not true.
Like, the argument is that the manufacturing industry in the United States is not critical to economic, like, growth globally, because those economies are collapsing in and of themselves. Like, you can't sustain them because they're declining now. Like, that's in the embassy.
All right, I'm gonna go to the dissent.
I'm sure it's under consideration.
I have US doesn't need manu, so.
So,
Okay.
sounds like it's fair.
That vote's under consideration.
Sure, cool.
The dissent is where we have definitively won this debate. Ryan made a mistake not answering the uniqueness, the link, or the internal links. You can extend across that Rubio is going to win both the primary and the general. Rubio is going to be our 2016 president. There is no doubt about that. That means that if you affect Rubio becoming president, that's uniquely problematic considering that we have won the first and second internal link, which indicates that Rubio will increase the arms control on Iran, which will check back all of the criticisms in the status quo that exists directed towards the Iran deal. When you disrupt this by allowing Bush to gain momentum because of his fizzling plan, then that allows him to usurp Rubio, become the president, and then flip that because he decides to repeal the Iran deal because he sees it the other direction as Rubio. This in turn leads to perceived Iranian proliferation, Israeli first strike, which draws in the United States, China, and Russia and other powers, which leads to extinction. This is cold conceded, Jason. There is no way out for them. We have won case arguments, and this is the tiebreaker. This is the definitive tiebreaker.
There's not an articulated impact extended
No
in the
impact
2AC.
extended in the 2AC. We've won the internal link down. Debate's over.
All right, so it's the AF in order, which is their solvency sheet, then Advantage 1, Advantage 2 with an overview on top, and then politics. And I'm gonna go kind of quick, so just tell me if, obviously, if you can't shame me. Okay. It is an easy vote for Washburn BK for a few reasons. First of all, the impact turns on politics outweigh both on time frame and magnitude out of all the impacts of the affirmative. Secondly, Advantage 2 is functionally conceded in this debate. They make a few link turns, but we have answered those in the MG's. Third argument is that there's no counterplan or school solves arguments in this debate, which means that it's try or die for the affirmative on solvency. The only argument that they go for is the starvation argument here. First of all, no, you conceded our argument that people are not able to pay their taxes in status quo, which means that there is no uniqueness to scenarios inevitable in status quo, not a reason to vote down the affirmative. Also, secondly, the affirmative is always outweighing with this, with the Advantage 2, but also the politics turns up. Extinction always going to outweigh your starvation impacts. The third argument is this is not true, that local development is not impossible. They are still existing within the status quo. They're still able to create some type of revenue. The only reason as to why it's not possible is because the fact that the United States is exporting food aid there. Now, the next reason is we don't decrease government funding either. They do not answer this argument that we close tax deduction and tax loopholes, which means that we do not result in a net decrease of government funding and people are more able to pay their taxes with our plan issues that we solve. Advantage 1. The first argument that they go for here is the 50% argument. That's fine. We don't even need to go for this advantage. We're not going for the middle class advantage. I'll just answer the arguments here that also apply to Advantage 2. This is the U.S.-China interrelated arguments here. First of all, you have conceded Ryan's argument that Russia and China do not impact the U.S. economic decline. This just gives us uniqueness to what the United States has to act to stabilize the global economy and stabilize the United States dollar. You also conceded that China manufacturing is high. You do not answer the intricate arguments as to why China manufacturing is high, regardless of the fact of how their economy is doing, which means that you're still able to outcompete the United States. You say that people leave the United States because of the corporate tax rate. That is not true. The reason they are leaving in the status quo is because corporate taxes are too high, which means that their profits are lower. They would say here, if we had less of a tax rate than China, that is logic. That is the reason why they would get more profits in the United States. Then, if they went to China, outsourcing would not happen. They outsource in the status quo because the tax rates are too high. There's nothing else I need on this piece of paper. We allow for individuals to have higher purchasing power. There's not offense on this piece of paper. There is no impact to poverty. That's fine. It's probably going to happen anyways in the squad. Advantage 2. This was functionally conceded. The only thing that they have here is this corporate tax argument link turn. That's fine. We have answered that argument by saying that corporate taxes are the reason corporate taxes are they're high in the squad, which means the profits are low. This is the reason as to why they would come back to the United States, and we give them literally a tax break for bringing jobs back. That is logical and makes sense. They would make more money here than they made in China. Also, we have uniqueness arguments, multiple ones, as to why the Chinese economy and manufacturing sector is growing regardless of China problems in their overall economy. Their manufacturing sectors are still doing well, which means we have uniqueness to hegemony. You don't articulate reasons as to why this means that U.S. hegemony there's no warrant as this. Extend across the uniqueness scenario, we are able to solve hegemony, which is able to solve for allied proliferation, which we contend happens at a larger magnitude than Advantage 1 and faster time frame. Politics. They misunderstand our argument. We say the whole thing has to be repealed. This is the warrant for our impact terms. They say the reform things such as the inspections. This does not matter. This is Ryan makes the argument that Israel literally wants the whole thing repealed. Our argument, or what?
They also don't tell you what repeals he's going to make, which means that you have no probability that
That's
they're
new,
right.
I'm not gonna say that.
Well,
The first argument is this literally doesn't, no, it literally doesn't matter. They only talk about inspections, which means that this does not answer a specific scenario. First of all, you can see the argument about Mossad. You say this has Iran, but no, Mossad is the security agency of Israel, not of Iran, which is a reason as to why we have access to this. Mossad is looking to watch the GOP candidate of Jeb Bush repeal it in the status quo. They want Jeb Bush to repeal. They have threatened to attack Iran if it is not repealed in the status quo. This is a reason as to why our act is critical to solving this. But additionally, you say the pro-life deal is good because Iran wants economic revenue. You've conceded our argument that Israel does not want Iran to have any leverage. They do not want their economy to improve. This would be bad because they are the enemy of Israel. Then you answer Saudi Arabia by pro-life not very well. Our argument is that Saudi Arabia fears Iranian hegemony, which is why Iran's economy would have to be low in the status quo. Additionally, you say that they would massively increase centrifuges in the status quo. Not true. You've conceded our argument as to regardless of if they increase centrifuges, it's only a question of Israel first strike and Saudi Arabia first strike, which only happens to hold the status quo because you do not allow for the deal to be repealed. Which is this is a unique affirmative advantage for the affirmative action. You say that Rubio's key to inspections doesn't matter. It's a perception of Israel think that the United States has abandoned them and that the United States is an ally with Iran, which is Israel's number one enemy within the region. Then you answer the oil argument by saying Saudi Arabia won't buy the nukes because they like inspections. Not argument. Our argument is that Saudi Arabia wants the deal repealed because they don't want Iranian hegemony to increase. This is our argument. Is our number one and number four argument. You also conceded that you say Saudi Arabia will never flood the market. Don't need this actually. Then you've conceded Saudi Arabia will never strike in the status quo, and we are able to allow for a balance of power with the repealing of the Iran deal. This is absolutely critical to solving, but then you make a couple more arguments. You say so it doesn't flood the market, don't need that. Then you say Bush repeals. Yeah, that's your number 14 argument. Extend that across. It gives uniqueness. You say there's no warrant for this NSA argument. Not true. Our argument is that Iranian hegemony increasing destabilizes Yemen because they are expanding their sphere of influence here. This is also giving us uniqueness as to why Saudi Arabia wants them to not have any type of economic prowess. It doesn't matter if the economy of Iran collapses. This is not an outweighing of the proliferation scenario. We get access to inroads of your proliferation impact scenario. Then you give this stuff like we don't extend the impacts. These are your impacts that you extend to the EMO. It's a reason as to why we get access to the impact terms at the end of the day. Look, at the end of the day, it's a risk of perception that Israel, Saudi Arabia don't want Iran to have any leverage at all.
Thank you. So, let's finish. We grab some water, Jason.